find myself looking for people who've been erased, for people whose stories have been forgotten. And when I find those people, I realize that I want to write their stories and give them a voice and bring them into the present, and into the reader's consciousness. And I mean, that's what happened with Richie, right? I knew nothing about Parchman Prison. I didn't even know kids like him existed, right? That there had been 11 and 12-year-olds who had been charged with petty crimes and then sent to Parchman Prison until I began researching Parchman. And then when I figured out that kids like him existed, I thought, I have to write about this child who, and the children like him who have been erased. I grew up in Mississippi and I didn't even know that he existed and that children like him lived and died. So I find myself now finding more inspiration in history books. Well, not one true person, but I guess like a collection of children, right? Because I was researching Parchman Prison and found out that there were a lot of young black boys, 11 and 12 years old, who were charged with things like vagrancy or loitering, and then were sentenced to Parchman Prison, where they were basically re-enslaved because Parchman Prison was a working plantation back in the 40s and 30s. I write from the beginning to the end, and once I have a rough draft, I let it sit for like a week, and then I go back and then I read the entire manuscript, and then I make a list of things that I can revise, and then I go back and I do one revision for each thing that I want to revise. So if I want to, say, develop Richie as a character, focus on one character's character development, that's what I do for an entire revision. And then I cross that off the list, and then I look at the next thing, and then I go back and I revise, like looking at that one thing, so that I will revise like 10 to 12 times, revise a manuscript 10 to 12 times before I bring it to my editor. I am actually under contract for 2 books, right? But I'm only working on one of them. I attempted to write rough drafts of both of them at the same time, but I figured out really quickly that I can't do that I have to focus on one project at a time. So the adult literary novel is due first on my contract, so that's what I'm working on now. It's actually unlike anything that I've ever written. It's set in New Orleans in the early 1800s, and it follows an enslaved woman, right, who is basically marched south from South Carolina to be sold in the slave markets in New Orleans. So that's what I am currently working on. The other book that I have under contract is a YA book, YA or middle grade book, and I have an idea for it, and I've been reading a lot of YA and fantasy books in an attempt to figure out how those stories work, because I've never written one before. So I haven't started writing the YA or middle grade book, but I'm sort of turning it over in my head and thinking about it.